It's more important that I'm squinting in the light than I am dark with my eyes open.
Yeah.
No, this is. Seven, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of the country.
Okay, got it. Okay. So talk about this event and what you're hoping to do here today.
Sure. Well, I like to have coffee. Chris and I are coffee fans, and so I think most of America's challenges over the years can best be solved by having coffee with each other, breaking some bread. And so what I want to do is take advantage of the quote recess, the time home, to hear from as many North Dakotans as possible. Because quite honestly, that's the blessing of the people's house, is that stay connected. That was how the founders designed it, and I enjoy it personally, but I also, more importantly, I think access to the public is one of the greatest blessings of public life in North Dakota. I just want to take advantage of the collective knowledge and experience of people that live with the policies that are passed in Washington. They're not theories. They're theories to some people, but they're reality to others. So I just want to hear from them.
And what are some of the topics you hope to talk about?
Well, I want to talk about whatever they want to talk about. I'll make some opening statement regarding what's going on, what we expect to have on our plate coming into the fall. And it's going to be a very busy fall. We have to get end of the fiscal year, the budget cycle, so we're on continuing resolutions, raising the debt ceiling. Obamacare kicks in October. Now we have the Syrian situation that requires certainly some attention. And so probably throw those issues out as things that I know we're going to be dealing with, Farm Bill certainly, and then try to answer their questions. So it's really more about me hearing from them, and then them hearing from me about the things that are interesting for them, not necessarily.
Do you expect the Farm Bill project to be soon?
We will bring it up. Majority of leaders told me the other day, we will bring it up in the first week we're back, on September 9th. We will pass the nutrition portion of the bill. We've already passed the farm portion of the bill. When we pass the nutrition piece, we'll then send it to conference committee, name conferees, the speaker. I expect we'll have conferees named before the end of September. And I expect shortly after that we'll have a bill going on both the second house and have a great bill, a law.
Do you expect or hope to be on that conference?
You know, I don't know that I will be. We already have Senator Hogan on the conference from the Senate side. I'd be happy to serve on the conference. But in all honesty, as somebody who's not a member of the Agriculture Committee, I probably had more input in the Farm Bill than any question on that. I'm not as concerned about who's on the conference as what comes on the conference. We'll see. I haven't asked to be on the conference. They haven't asked me to be on the conference. I do think pre-conference discussions have already begun. There's already been some negotiating going on between the leadership of the House Ag and the Senate Ag. So I think it'll be very efficient once we get back and go on rest.
That's all I have.
Oh, good. Is that what you need? Thank you. Wait. Let's answer your question first. What's on your mind?
She wants to know if you have any things.
Roy wants to know about
Yeah. You're going to post it on the video. There was a video. Hey, she did good. I thought that would pass, right? Great
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So let's, so he's yelling German at me. Good morning and welcome. In respect to your time, it is 9 o'clock, and we want to be prompt. Good morning, Senator. And take as much time as many questions in that amount of time as we can take, and also hear as many statements as we can in that amount of time. So out of respect for that, let's start on time. And let me start by saying thank you. Thank you for the irrevocable gift of your time. It's a precious thing, and it means a lot to me that you're here to share with me, to listen to me. I always say that the greatest gift, the greatest blessing of public life in North Dakota is the public. And we're blessed here in this state to have tremendous access to each other. And I cherish that access. One of the things I've learned about being in the House of Representatives is that we're especially blessed in that chamber because we, by design, are forced to stay connected. It's kind of a cool thing, you know. Having two chambers in the Congress was a compromise when the founders were putting it all together. They wanted a deliberative body in the Senate where you had two members from every state that ran for election every 6 years, but they also wanted to have a people's house where you're up every 2 years and you represented a population base that you could stay close to. Now, of course, the somewhat oddity of being an at-large member, that is to say, a member that represents an entire state, is sometimes clumsy in that whole scenario. And yet I love it. I love it. I love the big rectangular congressional district that we call North Dakota, and it allows me to put a lot of miles on. And I do. I love our state, and I appreciate you being here. Let me just say this, because I want to talk about what's on your hearts more than perhaps what's on mine. I suspect in several cases it'll be the same. But as an introduction, I think, to lay some things on the table, I would just tell you that when we go back to work on September 9th in Washington, this is what they call recess. It's nothing like my first grader's recess, I assure you. It's great to be home, but it's hard work. I love it. But when we go back on September 9th into session, there are a number of issues pending that are urgent and that are big. Among those are, September 30th, of course, is the deadline for the budget, which means there will have to be consideration of funding the budget for the next year, or at least for some months of the next year, and we will, in all likelihood, bring up what's called a continuing resolution, or CR. That's congressional speak. CR, continuing resolution, is funding of the government going forward under the same guidelines and the same basic budget guidelines as we're under currently. It's just a continuation of the current budget. You have to do it in order to fund the government to keep it running. Shortly after that, shorter than we thought when we left for recess, we will come up against the debt ceiling. That is to say that the government's borrowing power. We thought that was going to probably be in mid-November, maybe even as far out as December, but the Treasury Secretary Jack Lew called, I guess earlier this week, to say that it will now be in October. So that's going to hit us pretty quickly. We also, of course, have the kicking in of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, on October 1st. We know that there have been some delays for certain parts of the population by executive order, including, of course, the delay for employer mandate for a year. There's also been last week that the president sort of announced that the insurance companies would also be exempt from the requirements of the law for another year. Left out of all that, of course, is the mandate for the worker. They're all still mandated. So we've got a number of those issues that are going to no doubt make their way into the debates. On top of that, we have comprehensive tax reform that many are pushing and want to have done yet this year. Comprehensive immigration reform that many are pushing and want to have done this year. And we have the Farm Bill. The current farm law will expire on September 30th, The Senate has passed a farm bill that includes both the nutrition program of food stamps as well as the farm portion. The House has passed the farm portion of the farm bill, and we will take up the nutrition portion first week back. Once that is passed, assuming it is, and even if it's not, frankly, the Speaker will then appoint conferees, and I think we'll have a conference committee with the Senate on the farm bill by the end of this month, or by the end of September. All of that's happening, and all of that is part of, while it's part of individual discussion, when there's urgency created by deadlines, it becomes part of the whole discussion. And then thrown into the middle of all that, of course, is the situation in Syria, which we didn't necessarily see coming, and we were very familiar, obviously, with what's going on in Syria with regard to the civil war. We're very familiar with the fact that the leader of Syria, Assad, is a surrogate of the Ayatollah in Iran. That's a problem for our friends in Israel, and it's a problem for the United States. But the use of chemical weapons is a sort of a new twist into all of that. And the president's red line, which I suspect today he regrets, has boxed him in. And so Congress is suddenly in the middle of that, and appropriately so. In fact, I say when we go back September 9th, there's always a possibility we could go back sooner than that, depending on what the president decides he wants to do with regard to some sort of a military strike against Syria. All of those are what's going to be happening in the next couple of months. And I'm happy to talk about any or all of those, along with entitlement reform, budget reform, everything except when school should start. That is above my pay grade. So we'll leave that one alone. You know, one thing about hot days, they make for beautiful mornings, don't they? So with that, let's open the floor and talk about what you want to talk about. Somebody throw something out. I will repeat your statement or your question as best I can, and if I can't, then I'll have you come up. Yes?
Congressman Cramer, my name is Karen. I'm a dietitian with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I'm here to talk about the thing you brought up earlier, the Farm Bill, which includes the SNAP program, which those benefits, 83%.
Hold on one second. Karen, would you come up here, because you've got a lot to say and you're an expert. So I want you to use the microphone. And I'm sorry you don't have a cordless one. So do you mind doing that for me? All right, thank you. Karen's a nutritionist, and she wants to talk about the SNAP program and the farm program.
Yes. So 83% of the SNAP benefits go to families that have a child, a disabled person, or a senior citizen. For about 50 years, the Farm Bill process has linked the people that grow our food, which is really important to our economy in the United States, with the people that eat food. The House has kind of cut that link between there. And so in the House, they're proposing very large cuts, over $40 billion to the SNAP program. And I would just ask you to support a program that has provides things that are vital to life now and vital to our health for people in this country.
Great point, Karen, and that's a great opening. And thank you for that, because she's factually right on point. The food stamp program has, for about 50 years, you did a great job. You did great. Thank you. For about 50 years has been directly connected to the farm program. And the reason for that, and I think it's important to look at context. The reason for that is that those that support food stamps and those that support agriculture come from oftentimes very different places. And neither side, if you want, I don't like to say sides, because I don't think it's about sides, but it's about building majority coalitions, right? So it was a strategic alliance that brought the growers of food together with the consumers of food in a way that created a majority coalition to pass important farm safety net legislation and important consumer safety net policy. That broke down this year, and that has been a tradition for 50 years, and it broke down for a couple of reasons. First of all, when the Farm Bill was brought to the floor of the House of Representatives, the Farm Bill that failed, it had that connection to it. Food stamps were connected. It came out of the committee, a very bipartisan process. The chairman of the committee, Frank Lucas, the Republican from Oklahoma, the ranking Democrat, Colin Peterson from Minnesota, and a good friend. In fact, Colin and I held a joint round table in Moorhead on the Farm Bill before voting on it. But there was a breakdown in that that there was the food stamp program, that the SNAP program has more than doubled in the last 5 years, to the point where it's now over 80% of the entire farm bill. And that bothered a lot of people, especially on the Republican side. 172 Republicans voted for that bill that had the farm and the nutrition piece together. The problem was only 24 Democrats did. That half of the coalition was not able to join with us. And the reason, in fairness to them, the reason they did it is because there were reforms put into the SNAP program that they didn't like. By the way, they're all for it now because of what's about to happen. Those reforms, and just to put in context, actual numbers, the farm program is just under $200 billion over 10 years. The nutrition piece of that is of just under $800 billion over 10 years. That, just to give you context of the gap between these two, because the one half has grown so dramatically, the food stamp piece, and the farm piece has actually decreased in cost. Now, Karen's exactly right about who uses food stamps, who needs food stamps. Let's put it that way, who utilizes them. But because 172 Republicans and 24 Democrats don't make a majority, the Farm Bill failed. So in an effort to try to revive the Farm Bill and pass it, House Republican leadership decided to separate the two and see if we couldn't pass each one with a clear debate about both topics. We were able to pass the exact same Farm Bill, separate from the nutrition piece. Now we're going to bring up the nutrition piece separate from the Farm Bill the first week back. The cuts that Karen talks about are not really appropriations cuts at all, because the Farm Bill is not an appropriations bill, it's a policy bill. The policies that are going to be included and were included previously are this. The nutrition program, people that sign up or that become eligible for the food stamps are eligible in a number of ways, but one of the ways that has been of great concern to policymakers is a category called categorical qualification. And what that is, that was a compromise in the 1996 Welfare Act. Remember when President Clinton signed the Welfare Act, which had work requirements for welfare and getting people off of welfare, one of the conditions was that the Republicans went for categorical qualification for food stamps. What that means is that states determine the qualification for food stamps. If you qualify for any program, you qualify for food stamps, including the energy assistance program, low-income LIHEAP, low-income heating assistance. There are states who will give $1 a month to a family for LIHEAP assistance to allow them to qualify for several $100s in food stamps. The result in that is that, we need a little more quality control there, and so that's one of the conditions. The other condition, and I think the one, Karen, and correct me if I'm wrong, the one that was the most offensive to some in the House was the qualification that would give states the authority to run, if they chose, if they chose to run a pilot program that would require able-bodied adults who do not have dependent children to either be training for a job, looking for a job, or holding a job as a requirement. That one piece was so offensive to some that they voted against the Farm Bill. Now that's frankly kind of tough for me to accept now. So that's why we thought, well, let's separate these two. Let's pass the farm piece, which, by the way, is superior to the Senate bill, and I can talk about the details if you'd like. And now we'll take up the same exact nutrition piece. Karen was correct in that they're estimating about $40 billion over 10 years in cuts. That's about a 5% cut in the program, maybe 6% cut in the program. A program that's doubled in 5 years. But none of it has anything to do with the appropriation. The money will be determined by how many people are eligible for the program, how many people are on it, and mostly that'll be determined by the economy. So it's really a policy position. It's not a financial position. So that's what's going to happen. I think here's the other thing that's going to happen. We will likely pass the nutrition program. It'll likely be mostly, if not all, Republican votes that pass it. Then the two bills will go over with the Senate bill into conference. It'll all be put back together. The reductions will be certainly less than 40. They might be less than 10 billion over 10 years. And then when the two bills come back, I think you'll see overwhelming support in both chambers. That was a long explanation, but it's an important bill for our state. John. About gas, oil, and ethanol. Yeah. Sure. Yes. Okay, so his point is, his question is about taking away regular gas away from the, as a consumer choice, which is a notion I reject completely. I think, in fact, let me say this very boldly, and where's the Democrat tracker? I know she's here. I want to make sure she takes this.
Right here.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Heidi. We love Heidi.
Thank you.
Very careful. When people talk about a comprehensive energy plan, I think we ought to have a consumer-driven energy plan. So if you want to use regular gasoline, you ought to have that right. If you want to use 10% ethanol, you ought to. If you want to use 15, you ought to. If you want to use 30% ethanol, it ought to be up to you to do that. So I regret that choice is being taken away, and we're going to look into it and see if we can't do something about that. With regard to ethanol, let's remember, I think much of our energy policy is being driven by the assumption that we are a nation of scarcity. And we were 10 years ago. We were very dependent on foreign sources of fossil fuels and energy sources. Today we are a nation of, not of scarcity, but of abundance. The problem is if it's a problem at all, is some of those policies that drove, for example, the renewable fuel standard, the mandates to use so much, a certain percentage of ethanol blended or biofuels blended, that policy was put in motion in good faith at a time when it was probably necessary. And a lot of investment of infrastructure was made as a result of that policy. So today when we find ourselves in this abundant state, it's unfair to certainly turn everything back around and say, by the way, those billions of dollars of investment in infrastructure no longer count. And nor do I think we ought to make policy based on, moment by moment. So I support incentives and tax code and other places that allow some use of biofuels and ethanol. It's certainly important to our economy in North Dakota. One only has to drive around and see all these counties that didn't even grow corn 20 years ago couldn't, and now they do. We need all of the above. We need all of the above. The problem is that in our current administration, all the above means everything except what's below, and we need to have a balanced approach to energy development. So the RFS, the Renewable Fuel Standards, hit a wall because of literally what's called a blender wall. Because the policy goals were based on not only lack of abundance, of scarcity, but also based on an economy that was much stronger than the one who's been in the last 6 or 7 years in the United States. So as a result of a poorer economy, as a result of more efficient automobiles, the actual amount of fuel that gets consumed by the American public is much less. And so consequently, the goals of biofuel goals are too high for the consumption of fuel altogether. And that's created a very clumsy situation. And you've seen some real fighting between both sides on this. But I do think we've sort of come together on that now and having a more reasonable discussion about what's appropriate. Maybe this isn't appropriate, but we can't go back to this either. So guess what politics is? It's the art of compromise and doing the doable, right? Yes, sir.
Representative Cramer, my question is on the change CPI.
Yes. Okay, Warren's question is, will I oppose change CPI in the House? And his point is, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Warren, I don't want to mischaracterize it. The change CPI could be devastating, would be perhaps devastating on people, especially that are currently dependent on Social Security, and probably those that are soon to be dependent as well. Change CPI, of course, is different way of considering this, applying the consumer price index. If you see there's other factors beyond just a simplest formula, shall we say. The president actually has come out, at least talking in supportive language of a changed CPI approach. Here's my basic position overall. Social Security is one of those things that the sooner we deal with it, the less drastic the fix can be. Whether it's changed CPI, I don't think it has to be. Frankly, I don't think it has to be changed CPI. But I do think that the growth in Social Security, same with Medicare. Now, Medicare is more urgent. Medicare will be, upside down much sooner than Social Security, which is why Social Security, in my mind, is an easier fix. Warren, I would prefer to do some things looking far out. Prefer to change CPI far out. That tweak things like, consider things like some sort of an indexing. Maybe growing the eligibility age by a month or two at a time for people well out, not people that are currently on Social Security, not people that are soon to be on Social Security, but younger people like me, people more like me and younger. Because let's face it, we live longer, we're productive longer. I actually think that both with Medicare and Social Security that some sort of economic indexing isn't inappropriate. I really do. I think that with small tweaks today, we can make sure that it's solvent for decades, as opposed to waiting 10 or 20 years and then having to make dramatic, drastic changes that I think will be much more painful. So I will tell you, I'm sort of uncommitted right now on change CPI Warren directly, but I hear exactly what you're saying. I have the exact same concerns. What's interesting about it is the president, as I said earlier, has spoken somewhat favorably. He spoke to the Republican conference about change CPI. But you notice we haven't done it with him yet. So I'm not saying he's committed to it, but he has spoken favorably about it. Yes?
My name is Eileen Walsh, and I represent the Dakota West Arts Council. And the council, we support and advocate for the arts in Bismarck and Manatee. Our concern is the National Endowment for the Arts, looking at a substantial cut in the budget session. I'm here to ask Councilman Cramer to support that there is no cuts to that program. To think of the arts as we use those funds here in North Dakota, it's primarily for our children, through our nonprofit agencies, to do programming for our kids, and to maybe look at the arts as mental health. So the positive things that we do that kids carry throughout their life.
Eileen is advocating on behalf of the arts. She is an arts advocate. She's an arts professional. And she's talking about support for the National Endowment for the Arts. And you're right, the National Endowment for the Arts grants a lot of money at the state and local level. And Eileen, I would also say that you're right in that North Dakota largely, in fact, I can't think of, somebody probably could, but North Dakota's Arts Council, North Dakota's Arts Community uses those funds in responsible ways. And arts does have tremendous value in our education system. It has tremendous value in our culture. And not just for rich people to enjoy in museums. We're talking about children that express themselves on stage in terms of the various art forms. That said, I cannot point out the fact often enough probably that we are a country with a serious debt problem. We are a country with a serious debt problem. And prioritizing is very, very important. That said, one of the things I'm most pleased about, and I do it differently if it was up to me, but the fact of the matter is, just since I've gone to Congress, the deficit's actually been cut nearly in half. It's been a bit of a hatchet as opposed to a scalpel, but we're making progress on the debt. The big debt issues are not going to be solved by cutting the National Endowment for the Arts. They're going to be solved dealing with the issues that Warren brought up. But we do have to have some symbolic change even yet within the discretionary budget. The discretionary budget is only a third of the entire budget. And the National Endowment for the Arts is that. That said, Eileen, I have to tell you, I think that we need to go through every budget with a fine-tooth comb and find those areas of waste, fraud, abuse. And while there isn't any in North Dakota, there might be in other places. And make sure that we get our budget, our fiscal house in order. But it is not lost on me the value of art to our children, especially in the education system. So that was a somewhat non-committal answer. I understand that.
I understand
but just know, I hear your heart. Margaret,
I want to talk about education.
Margaret wants to talk about it. Why don't you come up here and use the microphone, because I have a feeling that we all should hear this. Then I can drink a little coffee.
Well, I just want to talk about Common Core a little bit because no one's really talking about it in North Dakota, and it's highly controversial in other states. And we're finding out that a lot of people are calling it Obama Core because this is something that the president put in as a waiver so that people could get out of No Child Left Behind, and it has been completely put in place without congressional approval or legislative approval. And so that has a lot of us very concerned because it is a very costly program. Many of us see it as a complete dumbing down. They keep calling it closing the achievement gap. Well, the only way you close the gap is by bringing everyone down to a lower standard. And so a lot of us have very serious concerns, and I'm wondering what you can do about it.
Thanks. I didn't anticipate that one, but thank you. In the House, we've actually passed our version of, well, really our alternative to No Child Left Behind. It's called the Student Success Act, and it was hailed dramatically by our state superintendent, our school board association, our principals and administrators associations, and frankly, I didn't hear even much opposition. Really, I didn't hear any, even from our NDEA. And what we did with that, and frankly, nationally, the education community has been overwhelmingly supportive. What it did, Margaret, what it does, now remember the Senate hasn't taken it up, but we did pass it. And what it does is it consolidates programs, but more than anything, it puts all of the authority back at the state and local level for programs and determining what's best.